The Galactic Unity Academy stood as a symbol of peace among the stars, a sprawling campus where young beings from 200 different species learned together under the warm light of Kepler 442b. The architecture reflected the harmony within, crystalline towers rising beside organic living structures, all connected by floating walkways that hummed with anti-gravity generators. For 15 years, not a single incident had marred its perfect record. Marcus Webb served as the Academy's head of security, though most species found the title amusing. Humans were not known as warriors in the galactic community. They were the newcomers, the diplomatic ones, the species that smiled too much and asked too many questions. Marcus himself seemed to confirm these stereotypes. He was average height for a human, with graying hair and a slight build that came from preferring coffee to exercise. He walked the halls with a data pad, checking locks and updating safety protocols, nodding to students who barely noticed him. The Vrexian Empire had other ideas about humanity's place in the galaxy. They were conquerors, a reptilian species that had been restrained by the Galactic Council for decades. Their resentment had festered like an infected wound, and they had chosen the Academy as their statement. If they could strike here, at the heart of unity, they could shatter the illusion of peace. The attack came during the mid-cycle meal, when 800 students filled the Grand Commons. The Vrexian strike team materialized through illegal teleportation, their combat armor gleaming black and crimson. 20 soldiers, each standing over 7 feet tall, armed with plasma rifles and shock batons. They moved with military precision, spreading through the commons and herding the terrified students into the center of the vast room. Marcus was in his office 3 levels above when the alarms screamed to life. His hands moved automatically, pulling up security feeds across multiple screens. His coffee mug paused halfway to his lips as he watched the Vrexian commander, a scarred veteran named Crexus, shove a young Talarian child to the ground. The little one's crystalline body chimed with distress, the sound carrying through the audio feeds. Most species would have called for backup. They would have followed protocols, contacted the nearest military garrison, and waited for trained soldiers to arrive. Marcus did none of these things. He stood slowly, his chair rolling backward, and walked to the weapon locker behind his desk. His movements were calm, almost mechanical, as he opened it. The other security officers, 3 Palaxians and 2 Zentari, rushed into his office. They chittered and buzzed their concerns, asking what the protocols demanded. Marcus pulled out a human weapon, something he had brought from Earth and never expected to use. The railgun was simple compared to plasma technology, but it could punch through starship hull plating. He checked the magazine with practiced ease. "Sir, we must wait for the authorities," the senior Palaxian officer said, his antenna twitching nervously. "Protocol 17 clearly states that in the event of armed assault, we establish a perimeter and—" Marcus walked past him without a word. He stopped at the door and looked back at his team. His face had changed. The friendly lines around his eyes had disappeared, replaced by something flat and cold. When he spoke, his voice carried no emotion at all. "Stay here. Lock the door. Do not follow me." The Vrexian commander was enjoying himself. He had researched human behavioral patterns and knew they would negotiate, try to understand the demands, seek peaceful resolution. It was what they always did. He grabbed a ferric student, a small mammalian creature with enormous eyes, and held her up for the cameras he knew were watching. "You have 30 minutes to meet our demands," Crexus announced, his translator making his words understandable to all species present. "Release all Vrexian prisoners held by the Council, or we begin executing students. 1 every 5 minutes. The children wept in 100 different ways. Some made sounds. Others changed colors. A few released distress pheromones that made the air thick with fear. The teachers had been separated and forced to kneel along the wall, helpless to protect their charges. Then a door opened on the upper level. A single figure stepped onto the walkway that overlooked the commons. Marcus Webb walked steadily, his railgun held loosely in his hands. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply walked forward, his boots making soft sounds on the metal grating. Crexus noticed him and laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. "The human security guard! Come to negotiate, have you? Come to reason with us and find a peaceful solution?" He raised his plasma rifle and aimed it at Marcus. "Stop there, or I will!" Marcus shot him. The railgun made a sound like thunder compressed into a microsecond. The hypersonic projectile crossed the distance faster than most beings could process. It struck Crexus in the chest, and his armor, designed to disperse plasma and absorb energy weapons, shattered like glass. The Vrexian commander flew backward 15 feet and did not move again. For a moment, the entire commons froze. Then chaos erupted. The Vrexian soldiers opened fire at Marcus, but he was already moving. Humans were not fast by galactic standards, but Marcus moved with purpose and economy, each step calculated. He slid behind a support column as plasma bolts superheated the air where he had been standing. Return fire came immediately. 3 more shots, 3 more Vrexians falling with holes punched through their armor. The soldiers could not understand it. Their tactical computers had categorized humans as non-threatening. The data said they were weak, slow, their technology inferior. But this human was not behaving according to the data. He was not trying to talk. He was not showing fear. He was hunting them. A Vrexian soldier tried to use a child as a shield, grabbing a small Drexian boy and holding him up. Marcus's next shot went through the soldier's weapon arm at the shoulder joint, the only spot not protected by the child in his grip. The Vrexian dropped the boy and screamed. Marcus shot him again, this time through the helmet. "Scatter!" one of the Vrexian officers shouted. "Spread out and use the hostages!" Marcus dropped the empty magazine and slammed in a new one without looking, his eyes scanning the commons. He jumped from the walkway, dropping 20 feet to the lower level. His knees bent to absorb the impact, and he came up firing. 2 more Vrexians fell. The alien students had never seen violence like this. In their cultures, combat was ceremonial or conducted at range with technology. But Marcus fought like their ancient ancestors must have fought before civilization smoothed away the savage edges. He used cover, moved constantly, and showed no hesitation. When his railgun ran dry, he drew a combat knife from his belt and closed the distance. The Vrexians had claws and teeth, had trained in combat from childhood. Marcus was a middle-aged human who spent most of his time doing paperwork. It should not have been a contest. But the soldiers discovered something their intelligence reports had missed. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years before reaching the stars. They had refined violence into an art form, had written books and created schools dedicated to hurting each other more efficiently. Marcus moved through them like a machine built for a single purpose. He used their size against them, staying inside their reach where their rifles could not track him. His knife found gaps in armor joints, slid between ribs, severed tendons. When one Vrexian tried to bite him, Marcus headbutted the soldier's snout with enough force to break bone, then drove his blade up through the soft tissue under the jaw. The remaining Vrexians broke. 8 of them ran for the teleportation point they had arrived through. Marcus retrieved a fallen plasma rifle and shot them in the back as they fled. 2 others dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Marcus ignored them, checking every corner, every shadow, making sure no threat remained. Only when he was certain did he lower his weapons. He looked at the students, 800 young beings pressed together in the center of the commons, staring at him with fear and awe. His face changed again, the coldness melting away. He smiled, that friendly human expression that most species found strange. "It's okay now," he said gently. "You're safe. Let's get you all to your teachers." The teachers reported later that Marcus Webb helped every student to their feet. He spoke quietly to the ones who were crying, checked each one for injuries with steady hands. When the Galactic Defense Force arrived 20 minutes later, they found him sitting against a wall, surrounded by children who had refused to leave his side. The investigation took weeks. The Galactic Council wanted to understand what had happened. How a single human had defeated an elite Vrexian strike team. They interviewed Marcus extensively. He explained his military background, his training as a young man in the human armed forces. He showed them his service record from Earth's last territorial war. They studied human history, watched recordings of human conflicts with growing unease. One council member, a pellucid philosopher named Threnix, summarized the findings. We have allowed a predator species into our institutions, into the halls where our children learn. The humans smile and make jokes, and we forget what they are. This human, this Marcus Webb, he has shown us the truth. They are not warriors by our definition because our definition is insufficient. They are something more dangerous. They are survivors who became apex predators, who looked at their own world full of creatures designed to kill them and decided they would be the ones who lived. But it was a Ferric's mother, the parent of the child who had been held hostage, who gave the final word. She came to Marcus before he left the academy, relieved of duty pending the council's decision about his future. She looked up at him with her enormous eyes and said, "You knew you might die. Why did you come alone?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled that human smile and said, "Because every second I spent gathering help was a second those children were in danger. Because the moment that soldier touched a child, the only acceptable outcome was his death and the safety of every student in that room. Because that's what humans do. We protect our pack. Even when the pack includes 800 kids from species we'd never met before we went to the stars." The Galactic Council eventually ruled that Marcus Webb had acted appropriately given the circumstances. They also quietly updated their threat assessment of humanity. In the notes, visible only to the highest levels of government, they added a new designation. Humans were to be considered selectively extreme in threat situations involving offspring or young beings, regardless of species. Marcus returned to Earth, his contract at the Academy terminated by mutual agreement. But the story spread through the galactic community, told and retold, growing with each telling. The students who had been there never forgot the human who had walked calmly into violence to save them. They called him the honey badger in their languages, borrowing the term from Earth wildlife databases, the creature that was small and unimpressive until threatened, then became unstoppable. And in academies across the galaxy, security departments quietly began hiring more humans. Not because they wanted warriors in their halls, but because they wanted someone who would charge through enemy ranks the moment they heard a child cry.